the sleepy town of Maryville, North Dakota, nestled among fields of golden wheat and emerald corn, sat an abandoned house, long ignored by its inhabitants. It was known simply as the Patterson Place, an old Victorian-era home that belonged to the Patterson family, who had abruptly disappeared in 1988. It was a living testament to horror and intrigue, standing alone against the passage of time, a skeleton in Maryville's otherwise idyllic closet. A week before the Autumn Festival, a group of 6 friends decided to challenge the myths surrounding the Patterson Place. The group included the bold and charismatic Joe, his best friend, the easygoing and funny Rob, the smart and cautious Ashley, the athlete and popular student Kenny, the cheerleader and Joe's girlfriend Lucy, and the outcast and goth, Elaine. Bored and restless, they devised a plan to spend a night in the Patterson Place, right on Halloween, a dare that spread like wildfire across their high school. On a cold October night, under the dim, silvery glow of a half-moon, they set out towards the looming Victorian house, clutching their flashlights and sleeping bags. The wind howled ominously through the skeletal trees surrounding the property, as if nature itself was warning them away. The Patterson house stood ominously before them, a dark silhouette against the star-studded sky, its empty windows like hollow eyes watching their every move. Joe led the group into the house. The wooden floor creaked under their weight, dust motes dancing in the flashlight beams. The furniture was draped with white sheets, and the air carried a faint smell of decay and damp. The eerie silence was interrupted by an occasional drip from somewhere deep within the house, a rhythm like a slowly beating heart. Feeling a shiver down their spines, they quickly set up their camp in the dusty living room. To lighten the mood, Rob suggested a game of truth or dare. Round after round, they played, laughed, and shared secrets, momentarily forgetting the eerie atmosphere surrounding them. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the floor above, causing the group to jump. Exchanging nervous glances, Joe, followed by Kenny, decided to investigate. They slowly climbed the creaking stairs, their flashlights casting long, creepy shadows in the darkened hallway. Joe pushed open a door, revealing an old children's room, its wallpaper faded and peeling. In the middle of the room, a rocking horse was rocking back and forth violently, its creaky sound piercing the silence. Confused and spooked, they reported back to the rest of the group. The jovial atmosphere vanished, replaced by a palpable tension. But their fears were brushed off by Rob's joke about the ghost child playing at midnight. Just then, the lights they had set up flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Amidst the startled gasps, they scrambled for their flashlights, casting around for the source of the issue. Suddenly, a scream sliced through the darkness. When they spun around, Elaine was gone. Their laughter and light-hearted banter were instantly replaced with panic. They searched for Elaine, calling her name, their voices echoing in the vast emptiness of the house. But all they received in response was the eerie quiet that seemed to have swallowed her. They decided to stick together, moving from room to room, their flashlights casting erratic beams through the dark. They called out for Elaine, but each echo unanswered increased their rising panic. Suddenly, from a distant room, they heard a sound, a soft, pathetic whimper that could only be human. It was Elaine's voice. They traced the sound to the basement. With Joe leading, they descended the rotting wooden stairs, the air growing colder, damper. In a corner, they found Elaine, shaking and sobbing, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. She pointed to the wall in front of her. Etched into the stone were the words, "Get out." As they huddled around Elaine, trying to comfort her, a loud, echoing thud came from upstairs, followed by a dragging sound. Each thud made their hearts race faster. The dragging sound stopped suddenly, and then, silence. They looked at each other, fear palpable in their faces. Against his better judgment and protests from Ashley, Joe decided to investigate. He quietly climbed the stairs, leaving the rest of the group in the basement, huddled together. As he reached the top of the stairs, the dragging sound started again. Joe traced the sound to a room at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, an ominous glow spilling from the room. As he pushed open the door, his flashlight beam fell on something that made his heart stop. There, on the floor, was a trail of blood, leading to a figure. It was Rob, pale, lifeless, a gash on his neck, his eyes wide open in perpetual horror. The room was illuminated by candles forming a circle around Rob's body, casting elongated, monstrous shadows on the walls. Joe stumbled back in shock, his scream echoing through the house. He raced back to the basement, his face white, his breath ragged. He blurted out the horrific sight he had come across. A wave of terror swept over the group. They needed to escape. They needed help. But as they tried to dial 911, they realized there was no signal in the basement. As they debated their next move, another scream echoed through the house. This time it was Kenny. He was upstairs, trying to get a signal. The group froze, panic etched on their faces. Joe and Ashley decided to go up, while Lucy stayed with Elaine. They found Kenny in the kitchen. Or rather, they found what was left of Kenny. His lifeless body was sprawled on the floor, a kitchen knife sticking out of his chest. The once white kitchen tiles were now painted a sickening crimson, and Kenny's phone lay a few feet away, its screen cracked and smeared with blood. Suddenly, they heard a sound from behind. Spinning around, they saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was tall, wearing a black hood and mask, with only its cold, merciless eyes visible. In its hand, it held a gleaming knife, dripping with fresh blood. Joe and Ashley sprinted down the hallway towards the basement, the masked figure close behind. As they reached the basement, they slammed the door shut, pressing against it, their breaths ragged, hearts pounding. They explained the horrifying scene to Lucy and Elaine, who were paralyzed with terror. The silence of the basement was suddenly shattered by a loud bang against the door. The killer was trying to break in. Joe, Ashley, Lucy, and Elaine frantically looked around for an escape. They noticed a small window at the top of the wall, their only way out. One by one, they managed to climb out, cutting their hands on the broken glass. Once outside, they ran towards the town, leaving the Patterson place behind, its silhouette looking more ominous under the moonlight. When they finally reached the town, they explained the horrifying incidents to the local sheriff, their words tumbling over each other. The sheriff, although skeptical, agreed to investigate. As the day dawned, they watched the sheriff and his deputies drive towards the Patterson place, the horror of the night still fresh in their minds. Hours later, the sheriff returned with an unsettling report. His men found the bodies of Rob and Kenny, just as the survivors had described. But there was no sign of the hooded figure. Even more disturbing, the sheriff mentioned a hidden room in the basement, a room filled with old newspaper clippings and pictures of the Patterson family. The news sent shockwaves through the town. Parents pulled their children closer, doors and windows were bolted, and the town that had not known fear for years suddenly found it lurking in every shadow. In the midst of this paranoia, Joe, Ashley, Lucy, and Elaine were left with the trauma of the terrifying ordeal they survived. As the night fell, they found themselves back at Ashley's house, each lost in their thoughts, jumping at the smallest sounds. Suddenly, Ashley's phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. With a trembling hand, she answered. A cold, deep voice spoke from the other end. "You shouldn't have entered the Patterson house." With a gasp, Ashley dropped the phone. As they stared at each other, a realization washed over them. The horror was far from over. The slasher was still out there, and he was coming for them. In the days that followed, one by one, the survivors were targeted. Each attack was more brutal than the previous, each escape narrower. The slasher seemed to be everywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But who was he? And why was he so bent on killing them? The answers lay in the hidden room in the Patterson house. As the truth unfolded, they discovered a chilling secret. The slasher was none other than the missing Patterson's son, who was believed to have died years ago in a mysterious fire. He had been living in the house, watching the town from his perch, his mind warped by years of isolation and obsession. His motive was equally chilling. He believed the friend's intrusion had disturbed his family's spirits, and the only way to appease them was through a blood sacrifice. The realization hit the survivors like a freight train. They weren't dealing with a mere killer. They were up against a deranged man who believed he was carrying out a sacred duty. With this newfound information, they devised a plan to end the nightmare once and for all. Luring the slasher back to the Patterson house, they confronted him in a final, epic showdown. It was a battle of wills, a fight for survival, with the slasher proving to be a formidable adversary. But in the end, against all odds, they triumphed. The Patterson's son met his end in the very house he had turned into a place of horror. As his lifeless body lay on the floor, the friends breathed a sigh of relief. The nightmare was finally over. Or was it? As they left the Patterson house for the last time, a cold wind blew, rustling the leaves, and a child's laughter echoed in the air. The Patterson place stood there, its windows still like hollow eyes, hiding its secrets, a skeleton in the town's closet, a symbol of a horror that was far from over.